All right, today we're going to dive deep into a really unique and, frankly, complicated professional persona, the federal contractor. We're going to peel back all the layers here, who they are, the wild pressures they're under, and maybe, just maybe, a totally different way to think about their entire world. This one sentence right here, it just nails the central tension of being a federal contractor. I mean, really think about that for a second. Your job, the reason you were hired, is to get something done, to deliver a result. But the way you're actually graded, what determines if you succeed or fail, is how meticulously you followed the rulebook. It's a built-in conflict that pretty much defines their daily life. And that conflict, well, it throws us headfirst into what we're calling the contractor's paradox. This is all about that daily tightrope walk between these two opposing forces. It's a constant balancing act, between what the government actually needs and what the government requires you to do to prove you're doing it. And this slide lays it out perfectly. Look at this. On one side, you've got everything that leads to a great outcome: innovation, speed, actual capability. And on the other side, bureaucracy, compliance, and mountains of paperwork. That's the process you're judged by. The contractor is basically forced to live in the space between these two columns, permanently. Now, let's be super clear about something. This is not a story about people who aren't good enough or smart enough. Federal contractors are often some of the most talented people in their fields. The real issue is the crushing weight of the system they have to work in. They're not failing, they're being buried alive by overhead. So let's take a closer look at what that bureaucracy actually looks like on a day-to-day basis. Because this isn't some abstract idea, right? It's a pile of very real, very frustrating hurdles they have to clear every single day. Okay, here's the daily grind. We're talking about trying to manage a bunch of different systems that absolutely do not talk to each other. We're talking about paying for these super expensive software suites that only solve one tiny piece of the puzzle. And the reporting, filling out the same information in slightly different formats for 10 different agencies. It's a mess of so-called security theater and getting locked into vendors. All of it just creates this massive drag. And the result of all that chaos? Well, it's simple, and it's brutal. A ridiculous amount of time gets wasted just proving you're compliant instead of, actually doing the work. A fortune is spent on what's basically digital duct tape, middleware, just trying to get these systems to connect. And so much human energy is just burned trying to stitch this whole Frankenstein's monster together. And this right here. This shows the business reality of it all. It's what we call the squeeze. While the government's expectations for what you deliver are always going up, 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 the financial margins you have to work with are constantly shrinking. It's completely unsustainable, and it puts these companies under incredible pressure. So you see this whole mess, and what's the knee-jerk reaction? Pitch a new tool, right? A new platform that'll solve everything. But what if we didn't do that? What if instead we started with a completely different kind of conversation? The very first step is to just change the entire frame of the interaction. You gotta throw the old sales pitch right out the window. Because this is not about selling a product. It's about diagnosing a system. In that new conversation, it kicks off with this incredibly simple but powerful question. You don't ask, what are your pain points? You ask this, what are you contractually obligated to deliver? It just cuts through all of the noise and gets right down to the absolute ground truth of their business, the contract. Then, the second question flows right from that first one. Once you know what they have to deliver, you can immediately ask where the system is bleeding money. Where are you overpaying, not to actually deliver the thing, but just to perform the act of proving you delivered it? And finally, the third question brings in the element of risk. You ask, okay, given your contract and given this complicated mess of systems you're using, where are the gaps? Where are you exposed to audits, to penalties, or, to just flat-out failure? So these three questions together, they form the foundation of something called a systems diagnosis. But look, don't get hung up on the term. This isn't just another sales tactic dressed up in fancy language. It's a real method for deeply understanding the landscape before you even whisper the word solution. And here's the really powerful part of this whole approach. It gives immediate, tangible value to the contractor without asking them to commit to a single thing. No new software to install, no big migration project, absolutely no risk. So what does that immediate value look like? Well, first, just by going through this diagnosis, the contractor gets a private space to just think, to plan. Second, they get a whole new way to think and reason about their compliance mess. Third, they get a single place to pull together all those scattered requirements. And maybe most importantly, All of this adds up to a huge reduction in the mental load of just trying to keep all this stuff straight in their head. And this is absolutely crucial. All of this happens in a completely risk-free zone. At this stage, nothing is connecting to their live systems. You're not breaking any internal policies, and you're definitely not raising any red flags that are going to trigger a painful audit. It's a purely strategic exercise with real intellectual payoff. So when you zoom out and look at this entire blueprint, what's the big lesson? What's the real strategic shift we're talking about here? The lesson is this. For a professional who is literally buried in complexity, the most valuable thing you can possibly offer them isn't another tool to add to their giant pile of tools. No, it's a clear, protected space to simply think the problem through. The solution starts with a new way of seeing, not with a new piece of software. And that leads us to our final question, one I really want you to think about. If the diagnosis itself provides the core value up front, how does that completely change the game for absolutely everyone involved?